Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home. For it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church.
Samuel said to Saul, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites.
Jésus, par ton sang précieux, enlève mon iniquité. Regarde-moi sur les cieux, dis-moi que tu m'as pardonné. J'ai longtemps erré cœur rebelle, mais j'entends ta voix qui m'appelle. Au pied de ta croix maintenant, tout confus, brisé, je me rends. Blanc, plus blanc que neige, blanc, plus blanc que neige, lavé dans le sang de l'agneau, je serai plus blanc que la neige.
Now go, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. 1 Samuel 15.
Greetings, everyone. It is my immense pleasure to welcome you to this 24th edition of God is Not White. My name is Jafri Kaiti, and I greet you from Ottawa, Gatineau, the capital of Canada. I often remind our friends who are from Haiti that Ottawa, Gatineau is the city where the Ottawa Initiative on Haiti was organized. It's a meeting that took place over 2 days on January 31st, February 1st, 2003, when the white men and women who gathered decided they didn't like the government of Haiti. Haiti, that was approaching the 200th anniversary of its Declaration of Independence. And so these men and women decided that they're going to change the government of Haiti. And 13 months later, they entered the residence of the president. They overthrew him and 7,000 elected officials. And we can see the result today in the mess that Haiti is in, with 0 elected official left in office. So I am here to present to you this other edition of God is Not White. For those of you who are familiar with the program, you know that we've been sharing our thoughts, our understanding, our research findings on how people of African descent have negotiated their relationship with Judeo-Christianity over the past centuries. And so tonight, we will also share a few slides with you. And if you find it useful or convenient, we encourage you to join in the conversation at the end of the program. Again, so tonight, the backdrop for our conversation is the 10th anniversary of a sad event that happened in the United States, where in fact it is a massacre at a church. It wasn't the first, and sadly based on what we have seen in modern history, it is very unlikely to be the last such incident. And this is what we will be talking about this evening, discussing whether the behavior that has been adopted with regards to such incidents is better characterized as a capacity to forgive or a bad habit of forgetting, or even worse, of adopting cowardice in the face of absolute evil. And so this is a discussion that goes beyond the realm of family members or survivors. No, we are talking about our global community, our own behavior towards evil in our society. And so let us take a look at what we've discussed in the past. As you know, this program is focused on the relationship, the increasingly uneasy relationship that people of African descent have with the Judeo-Christian tradition or faith. Mainly Christianity. That's where I focus my attention because this is the faith that I know best, having grown in a Episcopalian church, where my father was an Episcopalian priest and my grandfather before him. Episcopalians are people who grew up in this tradition established by Africans who were formerly enslaved in the United States, who found freedom in Haiti in the early 1800s, when Haiti was the sole oasis where people of African descent, having self-liberated from the armies of France, Britain, and Spain, created this oasis where people were coming, the boat people were traveling from north to south towards Haiti. And so some of my ancestors benefited from that opportunity. And so they are the ones who started the tradition of the Episcopalian Church in Haiti. We spoke about the history of Christianity itself. We looked at some of the main players, whether it is Constantine or Paul of Tarsus, and then we looked at the difference between what Christianity or religion offers to humanity as opposed to the Creator through nature, through what we can see in the universe, and we contrast the two things. We spoke about some of the strategies that human beings have adopted to try to better religion, such as liberation theology in Latin America, in my native Haiti in particular, where a theologian, a liberation theologian, became the president of the country, and he was deposed by a coalition not only of the CIA, but of the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, the Vatican. And we spoke about why this wasn't surprising, because Archbishop Oscar Romero in El Salvador was murdered with complicity of the church, of which he was an archbishop. So we spoke about all of these efforts tried to fix the thing. And we explain why our conclusion is that none of these things are going to fix anything. Black Jesus ain't the way, and in the previous episode, we spoke about why perhaps it is high time for people of African descent, and perhaps all people, to replace preachers of myths with teachers of history. And again, we're building on that same theme for our discussion tonight: forgiveness, forgetfulness, or cowardice. Indeed, it's 10 years ago when a young white men entered a church in Charleston in the United States. And while they were doing Bible study, this young man apparently had conversations with the parishioners before he decided to kill a number of them. 9 of them were killed and others were wounded. To pay due respect to these 9 brothers and sisters, we will remind you of their names. Senator Clementa Pinckney, Twanza Sanders, Reverend Daniel Simmons Sr., Cynthia Hurd, Susie Jackson, Ethel Lance, Reverend DePayne M. Doctor, Shawanda Singleton, and Mira Thompson. Peace be unto you, brothers and sisters. And so let us have a few reflections on the concept of forgiveness. For those of you who grew up in Christianity, you know this story about Jesus teaching that if someone slaps you on the left cheek, you should turn the right cheek and have yourself slapped again. Now, this is fairly cute, but we have not seen Christians practice this in our lifetime. And I say cute, but perhaps we shall discuss why this is neither practical nor useful behavior. But before we get there, let us take a look at the actual happening related to the massacre at Charleston at the Emanuel AME Church in 2015, 10 years ago. Here is a quote from an article taken from The Guardian, a UK publication. This was very soon after the crime. "I forgive you," said the daughter of 70-year-old Ethel Lance to the 21-year-old man who allegedly murdered her mother in church and appeared at an emotionally charged video court appearance in Charleston on Friday afternoon, 2 days after a horrific mass shooting there. 2 days. There are many things to note here, right? This is a volunteered forgiveness. This is not a reaction to the murderer having expressed any remorse or having explained why this crime was committed. The daughter of one of the people murdered, only 2 days after the murder, comes up and makes the statement. And I recall how many people, self included, were shocked by these displays that were celebrated by some, applauded, but really caused much dismay to others who could have predicted what exactly happened afterwards. That is, a repetition of killings of Africans in the United States in full impunity for the murderers. And so forgiveness is not something that was displayed shockingly for the first time in Charleston. Of course, this was in 2015. In the same year, we have another example here that I'm sharing with those of you who are following this on YouTube or Facebook. In the case of Michael Brown, this young teenager who was murdered by the police in his own country. And here, this is the exclusive announcement in the media, the Daily Mail. I forgive the cop who killed my nephew, Michael Brown, but he must admit he did wrong to let the nation heal, says pastor uncle of dead Ferguson teenager. Once again, before the murderer makes any statements or asks for forgiveness, it is the victims who seemingly are begging the criminal instead of the other way around, offering forgiveness for free. I forgive the cop who killed my nephew, but he must admit. He hasn't admitted anything. He never told you that he has any intention of admitting to anything. And of course, the pastor says this is to let the nation heal. Obviously, the nation has yet to heal because those cases have happened repetitively. As we know with, these events of 2020 with George Floyd. But in between, there were a number of other people who were killed. In the case of Charleston, when it was announced in June 2015, we can read here in one of the news reports, we welcomed you Wednesday night in our Bible study with open arms. You have killed some of the most beautiful people that I know. Taiwanza Sanders is my son, but Taiwanza was my hero. Taiwanza was my hero. But as we say in Bible study, etc., etc., etc. Again and again, you hear these Africans who are being murdered, slaughtered, killed, offering forgiveness to a group of people who've never told them that they are sorry for what they have done, what they have continued to do to them. What explains this behavior? Well, we think that forgiveness that is practiced in the African community towards white terrorists is a pathology. It's a behavior of terrorized people who are trying to cope with what is happening to them. And unfortunately, the coping mechanism that they have adopted is something that is going to put them again and again in the same predicament. But that forgiveness, that pathological forgiveness, is associated with something else, which is forgetfulness. I know people always say, we forgive, but we don't forget, but that's crap, okay? In reality, this offer of forgiveness, especially this offer without any movement on the part of the criminal to admit to a crime, to beg for forgiveness, it is because you're trying to forget something that is painful, something that is hurtful. And as human beings, we can understand the desire to suppress pain. You can imagine our people who had been kidnapped from the shores of Africa, from their mothers, from their sisters, from their families, from everything that they know, from their communities, they had to adopt some coping mechanisms in order to survive another day, another hour, sometimes a few more minutes, in order to accomplish what they are trying to do, whether it is related to revolt or to connecting with someone else to try to get out of the situation that they were facing. So, of course, we understand how the human brain needs space to forget sometimes, but when the behavior is transmitted over generations and it is causing more and more situations of vulnerability, you got to check it. And this is my objective with this program tonight, especially when we see very troubling signs in the 10th anniversary commemoration itself. Indeed, let us read a quote here from the news media. As Barack Obama read the names of the 9 churchgoers who were killed by a white supremacist at Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. So now they're talking about one of the family members of those who were killed. He heard Obama call the name of his younger sister, Cynthia Graham Hurd. That was emotional enough. But at one point, the president broke out singing Amazing Grace. Pastors, family, choir members joined in. That's one of those moments when you just wanted to break out and cry. End of quote. Again, let us deconstruct this. Barack Obama, the former president of the United States, goes to the commemoration, the 10-year anniversary at the AME Church in Charleston. The people are impressed that a former president comes to share with them this sad moment where they are thinking about their loved ones. Barack Obama, everybody knows, is the first Black president of the United States. So the symbolism in there escapes no one. And so when he offers his participation in sharing of those moments of sorrow, you can understand that some of the family members and the audience, everybody who was there, would be emotionally moved on the positive side. But we hear at one point, the president broke out singing Amazing Grace. What is Amazing Grace? What is this song that is very familiar to all of us? This song that was also sung at the inauguration of Joe Biden a few years ago. And at the time, we pointed to the treacherous decision of those who made that choice. Because Amazing Grace is not a song about redemption as they pretend it to be. It is about impunity. John Newton was a slave driver. That means a kidnapper of human beings. He made his riches kidnapping boys, men, women, children from the coast of Africa. And of course, they rewrote the story to make it about redemption, as is a theme in Judeo-Christianity, just as Saul, who is actually the main character in the New Testament, was supposed to be someone who was persecuting the church, and he was on the road to Damascus, and all of a sudden he had a vision and he saw Jesus, and therefore he transformed from Saul to Paul, and now he went from being a persecutor of the church to become a leader of the church. And people just swallow these stories like that. When everybody who's analyzing this thing objectively conclude that Paul was a Roman spy. And his role was to derail the movement that the young Palestinian was leading. And once they murdered him, now they took the movement and transformed it into a tool of the Roman Empire. And that's why when they went to arrest Paul, Paul demanded that they took him to Caesar. Now, what kind of, lowly Jew would have that kind of power? No. And they escaped with Paul at night with 200 horsemen, soldiers, for one guy who demands that he sees Caesar. No. Okay. So, of course, one of the problems that Christians have with me is that they refuse to look at history, because they say they don't care about the history of their faith. They don't care about who made the decision of the 66 books that they are calling Word of God. They don't care about the votes at the Council of Nicaea, the votes at the Council of Trent. They don't care to know who are these criminals who made those decisions on their behalf. No, they trust that there is an all-powerful God who dictated to these criminals, what to write, what to compile, what to throw away, and these are the words of God. Now, of course, we're talking about delusion. So, just like Paul is given the seal of having redeemed himself because he had a vision, right? A miracle has happened, okay, and they put that in the books, then it becomes Word of God, and you cannot question it. Well, now, with the author of Amazing Grace, John Newton, the myth is that, he converted to Christianity, gave himself to God, but in reality, those who study history tell you that the man was still practicing the kidnapping of human beings while he was a so-called Christian. And there's nothing new about that, because in the enterprises, when they were kidnapping the Africans and deporting them, okay, you'd had Christians, you'd had Muslims, you'd had Catholics, you'd had Protestants, all participating in the enterprise, kidnapping the Africans, financing the building of these boats all the way in Europe, with exactly the number of spaces allocated for children, men, and women. And so there was never any incompatibility between their Christian faith and the crimes they were committing against Africans. In fact, it was a pope who decreed with the papal bull of 1455 that, yes, the Christians have all freedom to go and kidnap the Africans and take them away. And they could refer to Leviticus 25 verses 42 to 46 to say that their God told them that, no, do not enslave the people of Israel like yourself. When you need slaves, you go and take them from the people around you, and you will keep them forever and bequeath them to your children as inheritance. So there is no incompatibility between Judeo-Christianity and the barbaric behavior that we have observed on the planet for the past 1,000 years. Netanyahu is not doing anything new. He is doing what Joshua did in Joshua 10 when he attacked the people, the Amalekites, or when Abraham left his abode to go and steal other people's lands. That's what they've been doing on the planet. And so, John Newton, with Amazing Grace, okay, a song written by slave makers, and now Barack Obama, a so-called first Black president of the United States, goes to the commemoration, the 10-year anniversary of this massacre at the Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, sings what? Amazing Grace. And Amazing Grace is supposed to make everybody feel good and you have folks telling you that, well, you know, we felt as if there's so much solidarity that, you know, although this happened to a Black person, but it could have happened to everybody. Who are we lying to? Where are the list of Black police officers who, you know, lost their minds and jumped on, you know, young white kids in the United States and killed them? This never happens. It never happens because it is known, it is a given that white lives matter. And it is because we all know, we have been socialized to understand that white lives matter, that some of us found that it was necessary to state that Black lives matter. And then after all of these massacres, you saw some people started to put posters, all lives matter, you know, in a way to deride some of the white nationalists who were making fun of the Black Lives Matter movement. But all the time we said, Black people need to stop this habit of begging for acceptance on the planet. What is this thing about telling them that your lives matter? It should be understood that our lives matter. And that's why for a number of years now, we've been saying Black nationhood matters. Because it's not just a matter of killing individual Black people in their youth in the United States, in France, in Canada, etc. No. We are being killed as nations. Because when they massacre a number of people in the Congo under Leopold, it is not acts that are committed against individuals, but against a full number of individuals, that is a people. When they disrupt the map of Africa with the Berlin Conference in 1884, 1885, these are not acts of aggression targeting individuals, but rather nations. And to this moment, many Africans feel that they need to ask for permission whenever they stand as a nation. For instance, in the current time, the criminal who is in the White House in the United States decided to target the young president of Burkina Faso, our brother there, Ibrahim Traore. Apparently, there is gold in Burkina Faso, and Barack Obama has in his mind that he wants this gold. Well, that's what his ancestors have been doing all along. So why not him, right? He needs the gold. Yeah, it so happens to be in the land of the people of Burkina Faso, but that's just a small inconvenience. When did that ever stop them? Just like the lithium of Bolivia, they'll go and take it. And they will if we do not stop them. And so I applaud all of the men and women, the brave men and women of all shades and color and what do you call this thing? Denominations of faith, who stood up on April 30th, 2025, all around the world to say enough is enough. You shall not raise your hands against our brother Ibrahim Traore. Why? Because Ibrahim Traore is a perfect human being? No. We do not have perfect human beings in our countries. We do not have to have perfect human beings in our countries or perfect leaders in our countries, because yours are certainly crooked, wicked, evil, whether it is Napoleon Bonaparte, okay, who reinstated racial slavery in the Americas after it had been abolished in 1794, whether it is Leopold who committed these genocides in the Congo, whether it is the Germans against the Herero people in Africa, the Maasai, you name it. And today, as we're having this program, we are mindful that men who are clearly deranged in their minds, who are organizing demonstrations of their virility using their militaries when it's their birthday, these are men who have access to nuclear power, nuclear weapons. And these are men whose nation has used it twice, as we have the receipts in Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan. They are putting all of our lives in danger. And now they have the audacity to come and tell us, oh no, worry about this guy, that guy, these are bad guys. No, you are the bad guy. We don't trust you. And we have the receipts of what you've been doing for centuries on this planet. So when we're talking about morality, peace, you shut the fuck up. You don't have any credibility left. And so, Barack Obama, no, you have not done any service to our people by joining in the singing of Amazing Grace at that church. As a Black intellectual, as what we call in Haitian history, the affranchis, those who've been allowed in the big house, in Massa's big house. Your responsibility is to take this as an educational moment to tell our people why it is inappropriate to be singing Amazing Grace in 2025. And we need to learn new songs. How stupid it is for us Black people to be singing the same hymnals that these criminals had invented back in the 1800s when they were selling us, kidnapping us. Whether it is you in the Seventh-day Adventist Church who are still singing the hymnals of this white woman, Ellen G. White, and these other guys. Wake up, people. Free yourselves. You do not have to abide by their theories, their stories. And as the sister was holding this poster in front of the church, when some African people were begging for acceptance in their own country, the country where they were born, she says, white Jesus not coming. No. White Jesus did not come when we were being kidnapped. White Jesus did not come when Rochambeau sent dogs who were starved in Cuba so that they could feed on the flesh of Black men and women. White Jesus wasn't there. I'll tell you where Jesus was. Jesus was the slave ship owned by the Queen of England, Elizabeth I, and her partner in crime, John Hawkins. It was called the Jesus of Lubeck. These were the names of the slave ships. Jesus, Abraham, Moses. Why? Because this enterprise is always something that involves the three sets of criminals. The militaries who come and take over the land, the merchants who steal the natural resources or the mineral resources that you have in the land, and the missionaries who inflict your brains with ridiculous ideas to make you accept the situation of subjugation. And yes, my father and my grandfather before him were ministers of that church who were teaching all of these stupidities for a number of years. And that's why I find it all the more important for me to try to undo some of that damage. Because yes, victims can become part of the problem as well. It is time for us African people to stop being comfortable in an uncomfortable, unacceptable situation. Get out of the church. Transform those churches into places where our children will learn truth about human history. It is our obligation to do that. Stop crying, stop singing Amazing Grace. For in addition to this fake forgiveness and this fatal forgetfulness, when a criminal has just killed 9 people at Emanuel AME Church, and the police managed to put all of the gloves that they could find, to touch the criminal with care, and then they go to Burger King to buy him his favorite meal, they are spitting in the face of these 9 people who have just been killed and the others who've been damaged in their bodies, some of them for the rest of their lives. Yes, most of you watching this program are well aware how George Floyd was murdered, brutally murdered by the police. What was his crime? Well, the right blinker of his car was not working, right? The same police from the same country, they could not, make George Floyd accept the law without torturing him to death. But they could accommodate Dylan Ruth, who has just killed 9 people, and they could walk him carefully and feed him because his life clearly mattered. Yeah, you can try to rationalize, and it's all cowardice. One country, 2 systems. We were murdered so often, I started believing black bodies made better fertilizers. Donald Lamont Walker. Yeah. This is what it comes to when you accept cowardice as a system. Now, I will end with a few references. The first of which is from our brother, the Honorable, beloved, now departed because murdered, Brother Walter Rodney. Walter Rodney was murdered on the 13th of June, 1980. By a remote control bomb disguised in a walkie-talkie handed to him by a senior military officer, Gregory Smith. The bomb exploded in Walter Rodney's lap, ending his life. He was 38 years old. Walter Rodney is the author of How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. He's also the author of The Groundings with My Brothers, a book that has had a profound impact on me when I was a student at the University of Waterloo. I had no idea what Guyana was, except that, some of the students said they were from Guyana and others. I couldn't make the distinction between Guyana and Grenada at the time, except that I understood these were Africans who grew up in Latin America, the Caribbean, just like me, and therefore we probably were cousins without knowing. But when you read Walter Rodney, you see that this man who was murdered at 38 years of age, had a level of maturity, of understanding, was brilliant. You can only imagine what the people of Guyana have lost by having lost the opportunity to have this brilliant man lead their country. No, he didn't have a fever. He didn't die of old age. He died just like Martin Luther King, just like Malcolm X, just like Maurice Bishop, all who died before they turned 40, murdered by the United States of America. The CIA, the FBI. There's this one criminal in the US system who specifically targeted Black leadership. COINTELPRO, you know, all these things. It wasn't just one individual, it's a set of people who targeted Black people, Black leadership, Black nationhood. So, you know, I always say to my communist brothers and sisters who always, you know, accompany us here in Ottawa when we demonstrate against the participation of Canada in the coup against Haiti, and, you know, also brothers and sisters in the Haitian community who are, you know, hard communists, etc. And when they, you know, try to tell me, well, you should read Karl Marx and all of that, I say, yeah, I don't mind reading Karl Marx. But you know what? The people of the world need to read Walter Rodney. They need to read Malik Shabazz El-Shabazz, Malcolm X. They need to read Jean-Jacques Dessalines. They need to read Henri Christophe. Just like, you know, we read Mao Zedong and all of these. All humans are humans. There is nothing magical about Karl Marx. Marx has his own experience. We have our own experience. And when we put all these experiences together, perhaps we can find a better path for humanity. But do not approach this as, you know, there is, you know, the imperialist of the Americans, and then there is the communism of Russia or the Soviet Union. And we, what are we? We Africans started civilization. This is not talking about pride. This is history. And therefore, this forgetfulness that we have been practicing that causes our young people not to know where to go and take wisdom, that's what's putting us in the current situation. Yes, we need to put all of history on the table, not some history, and certainly not white history. All history is important for us to understand. And so, earlier this week, somebody shared on my wall on Facebook, and I thank them for that, this post, which where there's a comment that says, the people who threw rocks at Ruby Bridges for trying to go to school in 1960 now are upset. Their grandchildren might learn about them throwing rocks at Ruby Bridges for trying to go to school. Indeed, they are not upset because by raising the history of what happened with Ruby Bridges, you know, you are lying, you're falsifying history. No. They know it's the true story. They know it's the truth, but that truth is uncomfortable to them. It upsets them. And this is why, as soon as Donald Trump got in the White House, he's been, you know, given the task of coming back with the generals whose statues were brought down. Because these are their heroes. And they want to celebrate these heroes, just like there are statues of Leopold, the genocider of the people of the Congo, in Brussels. If you go, and you will see them all over the place. They haven't apologized. They're not sorry. Because it is us African people who've been offering the forgiveness for free. So why should they apologize? It's free. It's given for granted. And when it comes elections time, you either vote Republican or Democrat anyway. So you've got no real power. And so when we talk about the importance of history, it's because these free forgiveness, free offers of forgiveness and forgetfulness, and the application of cowardice as an approach to injustice and evil in our world guarantees a repeat of the same crimes. Yes. On the slave plantations of Haiti, Napoleon Bonaparte sent hundreds of dogs who were kept on the island of Cuba, neighboring island, trained to devour African human flesh. And they were using them in the war in Haiti to try to re-enslave the Africans. And in one of these battles in the city of Petit Guave, the dogs, although they were trained and starved in order to devour the Africans who were released to them, they say many of the dogs refused to attack the Africans and instead turn around and attack the whites. And this happened so many times that this was the last battle that they used the dogs, because the tactic or the strategy, if you can call it so, backfired on their asses. This means the dogs had more sense than these barbaric human beings. They weren't as racist as Napoleon Bonaparte, as Rochambeau, and all of these monsters who were unleashed on our ancestors on the island of Haiti. And so, what was the outcry when this was happening in 1802? Nothing. Instead, they started screaming bloody murder, saying that there is a massacre of the whites in Haiti. Yeah, it's the whites who were the victims, according to the newspapers coming out in Europe and North America and Latin America. Yeah, the truth came out, slowly later on, but it was already too late. And to this day, you have to teach that story, that history, despite all of the lies that are in the universities and the high schools all around the world. But the reason why it's important to teach the true history is not only to do justice to these human beings who put their lives in danger to fight for what is right, but also to stop these crimes from repeating. Yes, because when you don't tell the truth about those dogs who were eating men, women, and children in Haiti in the 1800s, now in 2021, you have this white man on his horse under the bridge at Del Paso, throwing his lasso after the Haitian refugee. Yes, it was 2021. It wasn't Donald Trump doing that. It was Joe Biden, who was the president of the United States at the time, and it was the so-called Black Vice President Kamala Harris at the time. They did not lift a finger about this outrageous crime because of cowardice. But what about us? It's fine to talk about Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, as monsters. But what about us? What do we say to Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, in this generation, we will have to repent not only for the crimes and bad deeds and words of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the so-called good people? Do you hear Dr. Martin Luther King speaking to you today? as the monsters are butchering people in Palestine, in the Congo, attacking the peace of the people in Burkina Faso, telling them that no, you cannot have the president of your choice who is investing in the infrastructure of your country, or deposing the government of President Aristide in Haiti and putting criminals in power, and for the past 20 years systematically destroying the Haitian state, and then showing up as hypocrites saying that, oh my God, they cannot self-govern. You depose their government. And that's why there are refugees showing up at your borders. It's not rocket science, and you're not stupid. We know you're not stupid. You're just evil. This is what I had to share with you, brothers and sisters. You can check the book by Sister Penny Hess. Yes, Sister Penny Hess is a so-called white woman. She's a beautiful human being. I had the privilege of meeting in the year 2004 as part of the African Socialist International gathering, the brothers and sisters who work with Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And I witnessed something beautiful with this organization. Of course, I don't pretend to know everything about how they operate, but there's something that I took from my encounter with these brothers and sisters who actually were the first people with whom I traveled to Europe for the first time in 2004. We were in London. We went to British Museum to witness what the Europeans have stolen from Africa and put in their museums. And we went to France and we saw the same thing in the Louvre. And Sister Penny Hess leads a group of white brothers and sisters who make it their business to work under the leadership of Africans who are fighting for the liberation of Africans all over the planet, led by Brother Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Now, this is what I can respect, okay? White people who understand their place. When Sister Penny Hess writes Overturning the Culture of Violence, and this is a book, in fact, I'll take the book to show you because I think it's worth it. Just hold on a second, please. Yeah, okay. So overturning the culture of violence is something that is important because it documents many of the crimes. Because it's one thing to say that such and such happened, but when you start documenting it, okay, the fact that for the longest time in the United States, it was a prayer meeting. People were carrying their Bibles with their little boys and girls under their armpit while they burned to death Black men, women, and children. That was common practice in the United States for the longest time. And if we do not put a stop to the pattern that we see happening now, it will come back. And so when Sister Penny Hess, documents this with pictures, the fact that white people used to make postal cards of these lynchings and sending it to each other to celebrate their evil behavior. It takes a white woman with courage and intelligence, emotional intelligence, and intelligence, period, to organize with other whites under the leadership of African men and women. And our brother, Omali Yeshitela, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, he wrote the book, One Africa, One Nation. And this book came out after our meeting in London and in France. And it is my privilege to have penned one of the sections of the book, which covers the events of Haiti. So this is also a very, very, very important book. The content is something that I think many of you will find valuable in terms of information. This is to say that every generation of human beings on the planet had produced beautiful human beings, whether it is in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, who have decided to stand for what is right. And so, by what I am calling for here, it is nothing new, nothing spectacular. We're just saying cowardice, forgetfulness, and the way. Because at the end of the day, our children expect and deserve a better world than the one we inherited from our parents. Thank you very much for having spent the time with me. For those of you who are on YouTube, and that's the end of our program for tonight. But for those of you who are on TikTok, if you are interested, I would be happy to entertain a few minutes of conversations with you. Thank you, and see you next week.